Right. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another webinar hosted by Versaille. Today, we're going to be talking about enabling a Centre of Excellence through Power BI. We're going to jump straight into it. So our agenda for today is largely based around how do we go about building a Centre of Excellence for business intelligence, specifically within the Power BI toolset. So recently we're engaged by South 32 to come in and do some Power BI enablement training. And part of that was enabling a community of practice and slowly building up to build a community, a Centre of Excellence around Power BI and business intelligence as well. So I'll initially be talking about what are some of the core functions that you need to undertake to build that capability. And once we've built that capability, one of the things that we'll really dive into is how we went about actually putting together the Power BI enablement piece for South 32 and what went into that training environment. Bill Coleman will then take us through that piece. When Bill's finished with that, we'll go into a Q&A session with Sarusha Moya, who unfortunately couldn't make it in person today, so we've managed to pre-record some Q&A pieces with Sarusha, and he'll take us through what it was like, training a global mining workforce in Power BI. And then finally, we have Janice Landman, who was based out of South Africa, so she's also not able to join us as it's only like 2 in the morning at the moment or something like that in South Africa. But she'll have some insights and value through the Power BI enablement. Janice was one of the students that was attending the course, and she's got some really great insights from there. So let's just jump straight into it. So what is building a Centre of Excellence around business intelligence? And again, I'm specifically talking around Power BI in this case, but really this could be played for any of your business intelligence tools. So there's really 5 core steps through the process. Power BI governance or governance in general, how you're going to govern how people connect to publish data, publish Power BI reports, connect to view those reports, edit those reports, etc. You want to make sure that if you're enabling a whole chunk of subject matter experts to come in and begin building their own visualizations within data, that you don't get the spread of Excel, in Power BI, the same sort of things, or the spread of access in the day, right? Because with Power BI, you want to make sure that people are building to a single source of truth and that the data sets that they are connecting to and so on are all governed and have been through some sort of process of being verified. And so I'll talk through a bit around that governance process in a moment. The next piece is around visualization best practices, and that's particularly focused around how do we build really great looking dashboards that are going to pop out in front of the users, that are usable, that are user friendly, easy to use, that follow some really great guidelines around, using good color palettes, using headers, footers, and the rest of the things that go with visualization best practices. Then we're going to move on to the training and enablement piece, and I'm just going to take you through a very high level piece of what we did with South 32 and what we saw as some of the key steps that you would go into building that training and enablement piece. And then Bill's going to take you through some very detailed pieces of that as well. And then we're going to go into how do we go about building a community of practice, and what were some of the steps that we did there, and some of the challenges, etc. again. And finally, just develop and enhance, take the feedback from your users, enhance and go through your governance, go through your visualizations, adjust and so on as you see fit, adjust the training, carry on building your community of practice, and slowly but surely over time you'll begin to build up that centre of excellence. So moving on to the governance component, anybody that's attended a webinar where I've had Power BI before has probably seen this diagram. It's quite important to set up a great governed environment for your Power BI users to use, and that goes for all types of users, right? So we're not just talking about users that are going to go in and view the content, but users that have got self-service capability to actually publish content as well. And you want to ensure that the published content has gone through some sort of step to be, ratified and looked at to make sure that they're on performance issues, that they're using the right data sets, and so on. The last thing you want to do is have people building reports where one person comes into a meeting, they come up with one number, and somebody else comes into the meeting and they come up with a different number, right? Now, that may be a case that those two numbers need to be separate, but why are they separate? What is the governance rules around those? And so you need to set up your workspace environment, your Power BI environment, to make sure that there's that single source of truth out there. One of the key enablers to do that, if you're looking at lots of users, is the use of Power BI in Premium. So through that, you could use the Power BI service to have your standard personal workspace. If you have a personal workspace, you can just sit and play in that workspace on your own. You don't really share anything. But if you want to have your team involved and building the reports together, you move to a team workspace where people could collaborate on a number of different reports. And then finally, when you want to send those reports into the enterprise, well, there's a governed piece around strict security controls that says before you get into there, it's going to go through some sort of area, for example, your business intelligence technology area, to actually certify those reports, certify the data sets that they're wanting to publish, and finally bring that into the enterprise workspace. And by having that certified trusted copy in there, the users that use that then know that they've got the right data. Moving on from that, obviously there's all sorts of things around, configuring RBAC security. There's other governance features within Power BI that you can enable or disable. For example, being able to download to Excel, being able to download the reports, the use of data flows, and a whole bunch of other things that go in there. But essentially what you're wanting to do is govern the way that self-service users get their data into an enterprise workspace. Once you've done that, one of the things you're wanting to look at as well is creating a clear reporting principles and guidelines. So making sure that everybody uses the same color palette and they understand the color, when to use color and when not to use color, the types of colors, what are the primary and secondary colors in there. What headers and footers, etc., what templates are available to the users, or creating templates for the users to actually use. Using themes within Power BI is also very powerful. And then creating very strict guidelines on when creating a report, what is the purpose of the report? What are you trying to get across? Quite often the analogy that's quite often used is a lot of people now use mobile internet banking. Nobody's really got a help manual for that. It's just intuitive, right? You go in, you touch, you go through the process, and you can use internet banking quite clearly. Your reports should be like that. They should be usable, very easy to see. They should pop in within 5 to 10 seconds. Whoever's reading that report should be able to understand what that report is trying to convey. It needs to have no ambiguity inside of the report. Hence why I've got there, you can see I've crossed out a pie chart and I've used rather a bar chart, because pie charts introduce ambiguity. How large is that particular pie, slice of the pie? In certain instances, you can't even get to see what the data is in the smaller pieces of the pie. So it's not always a good idea when you've got many values like that to put that into a pie chart. So you want to make sure that you've got a really clear purpose, minimalistic design on that, and that it really pops to the users in the end. Versa ourselves, we've got a Power BI Foundations Accelerator. So if you're ever looking to do something like this, both the governance and the reporting principles and guidelines are put into the accelerator, and we come in and help you in that as well, if you're looking to do that. In South32's case, they had actually already created the governance principles. They had already created their own clear reporting guidelines. But really what they needed was some help around the training and enablement within Power BI. So they've got several thousand users. They want to slowly but surely train up these users to use Power BI. How do they go about doing that? And then enabling that self-service part of it to really get their people in front of the data to be able to improve process, to improve value, etc. within their own particular areas. And for South32, I mean, there's a very wide range of users, everybody from financial analysts all the way through to people that are actually in the coal face at the mines, trying to do process improvement as well. So what we sat down and did for South32 was around identifying a trial group of users, because you're not going to push this out to everybody all at the same time. What you're going to be doing is saying, hey, let's select 20 SMEs in the business and see how they can take it forward and provide feedback on the training so we could adjust the training for other users moving forward. So we sent out an expression of interest to a wide range of users for their involvement, received a whole bunch of responses, selected some users across the business, and then went forward. And those users needed to dedicate some time to this. They understood that they needed to provide feedback and so on. So once we had done that, we began actually putting together the content and how we were going to deliver the course. Was it going to be online? Was it going to be in person? Well, in this case, over Teams or that sort of platform, because of COVID, we just couldn't get in front of people. But the other thing was that people are dispersed all over, not only Australia but all over the world. Right, so South32 have operations in South Africa, in Colombia, South America. So how did you get in front of these people? So we actually did both the built an online version so people could actually go self-service and have a look at that. But we also did Teams type involvement, especially for the initial courses, so that we could get the right content in front of them. And yeah. One of the things that we learned out of it was to deliver over time. Don't try and deliver everything in one go. The reason for that is that people are time poor. They still got to do their day jobs, etc. And some of the students that may come on may be very new to Power BI, and because it's such a vast and big product, and there's so many different things inside of there, so many different functionality features, etc., you need to be able to give them time to absorb that. So what we did typically was run maybe 4 hours a week, or even maybe 8 hours a week over several weeks, instead of trying to condense everything into 8 hours a day. Make sure that you cover content from beginner to advanced for all your users, right? Because you don't know who you're going to be getting in there. Some people may be new to it, some people may be advanced. And even from a beginner's point of view, they may not have been able to cover everything that you would have liked to have covered in the beginners in the beginning. One of the things that we found very useful was around implementing something called Bring Your Own Data. So what we did was we initially ran the beginners training and really gave them an overview of Power BI and what it could do. And then we asked them to actually bring their own data in so that they could see how Power BI could begin providing value using their data right from the start, instead of them having to go through all this training and then going back and saying, how do we actually use their data? So our guys sat down one-on-one with them, with their own data, and took them through bringing that data in and then creating some of the reporting elements out of that. And that actually led on to additional work within South 32, not for us, I'm talking about additional projects, because they started to see the value of their data. And then we took them through an advanced piece of Power BI where we trained them on DAX and other, other features within Power BI, more advanced features within Power BI to really bring the content home. Feedback is really important, so especially in the beginning with your trial users, making sure that you elicit feedback and then obviously adjust the course as appropriate. So we really understood that around that, deliver over time and not try and do everything up front. And then, obviously refine, improve and redeliver as we go. So currently we're delivering to the second cohort of South 32, and there are plans for a third and fourth cohort as well. So finally, once you've trained your users, you want to put down a community of practice where it's driven by those subject matter experts, right? Don't waste too much time on trying to figure out what tool you will use to implement the community of practice. In our case, we just picked up Teams and said Teams is going to be good enough for us to be able to create a community where they could go in, ask questions, paste snippets of code, put down files and their own PBIXs and experiences within that community of practice. But to get them started, what we did was we had our developers and trainers just put in some of our own experiences in there, just so they could see how that would work, and that then got them going to actually begin to really use the community of practice and drive it forward. One of the key things there is to make sure that your subject matter experts are driving that community and not your developers. Because you want the community out there to be able to share their experiences. Now, it doesn't mean that your developers aren't involved and may provide content, may answer questions, etc. But essentially, you want your users to be able to speak to each other. And essentially, that makes up the first 4 steps of our 5-step program. And then we go through and we, redefine and begin to redeliver and go through the governance process again and the visualizations and just adjust as necessary. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to introduce Bill Coleman. Bill Coleman's our lead consultant, advanced analytics and data platforms. Bill Coleman was the lead on this project and helped produce a large amount of the content that he's going to walk you through for the Power BI training session. So welcome, Bill, and I'll hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Chris. Yeah, like Chris said, our goal really here was to try to create a kind of a course that would accommodate a lot of different types of people. We have people from all kinds of different backgrounds with all kinds of different skill levels, and we wanted to make them all power users. So we wanted to teach them all of the basics around, just the standard, how do you import your data? How do you transform your data? How do you do all of those treatments to it? Right the way through to all of the best practices in terms of data governance and setting things up so that you're not smashing your servers and all of that kind of stuff. All of the data modeling issues. So there's quite a lot of ground to cover in this course, and we did cover a lot of ground in great detail. So like Chris mentioned, one of the key learnings that we had was not to overload the students. We needed to kind of space it out a little bit for that point of view. And we needed to also make sure that we provided all the kinds of materials that they needed in order to be able to reference back once the course was over and they're getting back into their own real world jobs and they're trying to do this in the real world space, that they weren't lost. They weren't just dropped off the edge of a cliff. They had all of these kinds of resources to fall back on, including the community of practice. So the course structure itself, we divided it into two parts in order to help with this. The first part is what we affectionately call boot camp. And it's really, we should have called it boot up the bum camp, because essentially what we're doing is we are taking people from all kinds of backgrounds, whether they've got BI experience or not, and bootstrapping them up to a point where they can interact with and design and understand pretty advanced Power BI models and code DAX, do some basic ETL, extract, transform, and load operations with the data, and really get their hands into the nitty-gritty of pulling it apart and understanding how the whole thing works. So by the end of that first bootcamp session, what we've really done is we have established a baseline of all of the ground users and tried to really sort of make sure that going into module 2, everyone, regardless of their background, had somewhat of an even footing. And then module 2 is where we start to look at more advanced topics, where we deep dive into some of these groundworks, but also reinforce all of the learnings from the bootcamp. So in module 2, we're really reinforcing those bootcamp learnings. We're sort of guiding people towards a more advanced understanding of deeper concepts within that. And we're getting them to a point where they can actually start bringing their own data into play. And we're actually encouraging them to do that. So in module 2, we encourage bring your own data type sessions where the attendants of the course can actually bring in stuff that they're working on in the real world in practical terms. And we can advise them on what's the best way to handle this data. And what do you do when things aren't just quite working out the way you want them to do? Where's the solution? Where's the problem? And how to refer back to the materials in the course in order to inform that progression and help them to move forward with their analytics. So we did have quite a range of backgrounds. So in terms of the general technical expertise, we have people with a range of different experiences with data sources and data automation. So we had some people who were actually Power BI sort of pros in their job, and it was their day-to-day work to be handling all of this data input and doing stuff with it. But they might have had certain gaps in relation to the specifics of implementing this with Power BI and where the gotchas are and where the hidden real gems are as well. We also had people with a mix of coding experience. We had some people who had been working with SQL Server, for example, and they were used to writing SQL statements and they understood about databases and a little bit of relational modeling, and they could write queries. But maybe they didn't have so much experience with mQuery or with DAX or with any of the specific coding languages, or maybe they'd never even coded a line of code in their lives. So we really wanted to try with the bootcamp to get everyone up onto that same level where we established a baseline of competence, essentially. Query writing as well, data modeling, report writing, and that's a critically undervalued aspect. How do you actually write an effective report? It sounds simple, right? You just put your pie chart on the page and it will slice out and tell you what everything is. Wonderful. It's not that easy. I've been doing this for years and years and years, and there's so many ways to present the exact same data, and sometimes you can make it really obvious and present the insights nice and clearly, but if you don't know what you're doing, you can actually create something that causes more confusion and harm than deepening the knowledge and understanding behind it. So report writing was a critical thing that we tried to instill best practices on as well. Debugging. If you haven't done a lot of tech work before, debugging might be a bit of a mystery to you. Debugging is really something that requires a certain kind of a mindset. So we held the hands of the students through this process, particularly with the bring your own data type stuff, where they were encountering specific problems and they didn't quite know how to unravel them. So we were teaching these debugging concepts in order to make sure that they can do that. But that was more of the hands-on end of it. And finally, analytics as well, obviously, because the end goal of any of this kind of thing is the analytics. So we also had mixed range of Power BI experience. Some of them didn't even have Power BI installed on their PCs when we began the course. Others had been using Power BI for an amount of time and had a good idea about what it was and what it could do. So we have all of these mixes of technical background experience, but we also have all of the different functional business areas as well. So if you're coming from a marketing background, you're going to have a different set of experiences and expectations than if you're going to be coming from a pure mining and process improvement background. So while everyone has different end goals with their data, we're trying to support a journey that will take them to a point where they can use the standard tools and processes and approaches within Power BI in order to achieve those goals, even though they might be, at least on the surface of it, appearing to be very different. So how do we do this? Well, we landed on an iterative approach. So essentially the idea was, rather than trying to take a chunk of learning such as Power Query, which is where we do your ETL, your extract, your transform, and your load of your data, rather than trying to take them from beginning to end in one class with that, maybe just introduce them a little bit more gently and show them how to do it with just a single table and move on from there. And likewise with data modeling. Data modeling is quite a nuanced topic. Most people, when they begin starting out, they're just going to be dealing with one single table. We wanted to be able to break that in over a period of courses where they start, with that one single table, but we're going to get through to something a little bit more complex, because in the real world, you're not going to have the benefit of just having that one table. And report and dashboard design is another critical aspect as well that we needed to be able to break in gently over cycles. And not only then are we sort of doing the conceptual kind of side of it, because all of that is all very theory, it's all theory based. It's all, what's a Kimball model? What's a fact? What's a star schema? What's a dimension? What does ETL mean? Why do we need to care about that? That's all very high level business intelligence concepts. But mirroring that, then we also have the iterative approach of applying all those concepts directly in Power BI. So we're moving through things like Power Query with mQuery, and we're moving towards things like modeling in Power BI and report building and all of these types of things that are important to understand. Automation, how do you use the service, for example? So in order to make sure that the students are well supported on this journey, because there's a lot, we're trying to impart a lot of knowledge and information over a very short period of classes to really maximize the returns as much as possible. So we wanted to make sure that they had all of the resources to fall back on. So we had multiple streams of delivery backed up with multiple back-end sources of resources for them to fall back on. So we have all the theory presentations, so all the things I just mentioned. We're talking about, how do you model your data? What are the BI concepts that are at play here? We also then had some demonstrations where we would actually put this into play and show them actually in practice, click by click on a screen, answering the questions as we go. This is how we will apply this. And then we have practical lab work that they can do, where to a greater or lesser extent, as the course progresses, we go from showing them click by click by click by click, step-by-step instructions and doing something, through to more generic kind of instructions like build this, right? So we're really trying to deepen the knowledge on every cut, every iteration, every cycle that we go through is going to be that little bit more deeper and that little bit more tricky and less hand-holding involved from our end. And we also wanted to provide useful code. So one of the things that's a good outcome from this course is that students who've been through it are going to have this code base that they can fall back on. So we'll have all of these code files with snippets of DAX, snippets of mQuery, and various different Power BI templates and Power BI completed and partially completed designs that they're going to be able to use and reuse and copy and recycle and bring into their actual working life. And finally, then we made sure that all of the actual delivery resources were available offline as well. So we've created videos of every single presentation. Every class got recorded and was there in the community of practice, just waiting for them to download it and review it and rewatch it. And that's what a lot of people did. They found themselves watching the class once, going away, scratching their head and replaying the video and getting it a little bit more the next time. So it's really important to have all of that material as a fallback. And of course, all of the PDFs then for the presentations and the PDFs of the workbooks for them to work through. So really what they're left with at the end is multiple streams of delivery and multiple types of assets for them to fall back on. So even if they don't initially use Power BI coming out of the course and maybe they forget bits and pieces, they'll be able to go back to it in a week or a month or a couple of months' time, refresh their memory, grab those snippets of code and put them into use. So within the bootcamp itself, there was a few things that we really wanted to hammer home. So the first one, the clangor, the crux of a lot of the confusion and problems with Power BI adoption is the anatomy of the Power BI stack itself, because there's so much confusion. If you go to the App Store and you go to download Power BI desktop, there's actually a couple of different applications you can download there, and they're not all the same thing. And we've got the Power BI service as well. And what does that do? And how does that relate to the desktop tools? And why do we need both? And where's the appropriate use case scenarios for your desktop versus the website? So all of this kind of thing for novice users creates an enormous amount of confusion. And this is something that we picked up on through the course of actually doing multiple Power BI accelerators in practice with people, that fundamentally there was a lack of a grasp of the architectural structure of Power BI and how it was achieving that throughput from end to end, going from your core data sources right the way through to sharing your insights. And it's a complex stream of activity, and it's a complex set of interconnected technologies, even within Power BI desktop itself. You've got Power Query that has a really advanced coding engine in it called mQuery that you need to know a little bit about if you're going to do anything advanced. And then in the modeling section, we've got all of the abilities to actually create fully functional data models in a Vertipack engine sitting on your desktop. And that's a powerful thing to not know how to use. And DAX as well is an incredibly powerful query language, and it has a lot of depths and nuances to it that don't immediately make themselves obvious to people. So how does all of this break down across a stack essentially is the thing that we wanted to get to and really sort of hammer home that understanding. So with the ETL and the Power Query, what we did within the bootcamp for the first section, we started them off with a single simple table called Internet Sales. And this is just taken from the Microsoft demonstration, the AdventureWorks data warehouse, and a slightly modified version of that we made available for the students to hook into. And they downloaded this particular table and they learned the basics of how to import data and do something with it in Power Query, which is great. But by the time we get towards the end of the bootcamp sessions, we're dealing with multiple sources of data, we're dealing with multiple tables, we're dealing with complex concepts such as creating reusable functions and using them to build calendar tables. So by the time we get them through the first 4 sessions of that bootcamp through to the end, what they're working with is something that is a lot more nuanced and complex than they might have been used to dealing with. But that's what we need to do in order to establish the baseline. And what we found was that a lot of people undertaking the course, even who maybe had done Power BI before, were learning stacks and stacks of new things, both about the capabilities and about the best practices behind them and how to apply them in the real world. In terms of data modeling, it's the same thing. We took them from a simple internet sales table that we were instructing them on how to set that up for the reporting, how to control your fields, all of that kind of stuff, right through to complex multiple table models with multiple facts and an array of various different dimensions, and even getting into the area of snowflake type schemas and when not to use snowflake schemas, and disconnected tables for configuring input options, disconnected tables for creating a repository for all of your measures and all of that kind of thing. And speaking of the measures, we do a lot of DAX work because this is something that isn't necessarily very intuitive. A lot of Power BI is point and click, even through Power Query and even through your modeling tools. It's very much, there's a menu there. It's all driven with wizards. It's all, you can get to the underlying code, sure, but if you don't know how to read the code, it's not really a problem for a novice user to pick it up, point and click, and get to a good outcome. So what we did was to focus a good deal of energy on the aspect of actually coding up the DAX itself. So we took them from very simple measures right the way through to creating highly structured, highly curated, ordered folders full of measures that use measure branching and refer to each other and create essentially an entire ecosystem of analytical resources for an end user of their reporting to fall back on. We also took them through all of the report writing skills, like from basic out of the box. This is what Power BI looks like if you throw some data in it and point and click, your way through developing a report just using all of the out of the box tools and do no styling, right the way through to really more kind of advanced stuff where we're creating report templates. We're creating interactive reporting models that act like an application with menus that can pop up and disappear. We're teaching them techniques to replace their pie charts without losing the functionality. And we're showing them all of the various different professional level techniques and tools that we apply in the real world to make the reports look visually stunning as well, because that's very important. When something looks good, when something looks like it's cared for, the person consuming that data at the other end will have more confidence in it. And that's a very strong psychological kind of an impact that your report design and layout can have. So how do you guide the user's eye across the page? How do you make sure that things are nice and clear and concise and not too messy? And also, we were focused a lot on best practices in relation to the Power BI service itself. One of the critical problems that even advanced business users have is that they just turn on the Power BI service and they throw people at it and they expect things to work out okay. But without the proper governance and without the intuitive understanding of the people using the service as to what the best practices are, we can tie ourselves into a knot very, very quickly and create problems for ourselves down the track. And in fact, a lot of what we do as a consultancy when we're coming into organizations and reviewing their Power BI environment is to remediate issues that have arisen because of this overall lack of general strategy of governance going into the establishment of Power BI in general. So that's one of the things that we also needed to drive home a lot. So that's boot camp, right? So you can understand why we need to space this out, and we need to really give the students the space to learn and absorb and respond back with questions over time to cement these learnings. Because where we go from there is to recap and solidify all of the learnings from this boot camp. All of those concepts that we were just talking about, the ETL, the data modeling, the DAX, the report writing, the M-query, Power BI service itself, the overall anatomy of Power BI, all of those heady concepts and all of the specifics of the implementation. We don't expect that you're going to absorb them all in one go, so we want to recap them. So that's part of the advanced sessions. We also want to build on them. We want more. We want bigger and better. We want more. And we also want to then start exposing them to using this stuff with their own data. So in the advanced sessions, people are going to bring their own data in and they're going to say, hey, this is my data. I'm not really quite sure how to structure it. I'm not quite sure how to query it. This is the outcome I want. How do I get there? And by referring back to all of the tools that we've taught them in both the bootcamp and the more advanced sessions, we can bring them through from A to B and really sort of guide them into a position where they're starting to take control of their own analytical destinies. So final word, final takeaways from this, at least this was my perspective on it from having delivered this course a few times now, is that the key, most important things, there's three of them. First of all, a strong community is absolutely critical because people need to have that engagement to fall back on. They need a place where they can talk to their colleagues and ask the stupid questions and get the stupid answers or the great answers, or even just throw out comments. I learned this today. Hey, did you guys know this? And when you start supporting and fostering that community and rewarding people for participating in it, you'll find that what you actually build up is a repository of real excellence and knowledge and skills in your organization. The second key takeaway is to invest. This is a big investment. It's a big investment in headspace, big investment in time. It's a big investment in knowing that you're not going to be able to deliver the same throughput of business outcomes while you're on this learning journey. And that needs to be understood both by the students and by the sponsors coming into it when they're trying to establish this community of excellence. So I do like to stress that point quite a lot, because the more you can give into this, the better you're going to come out of it. And the final thing is, make sure you have a good strategy for your governance. So don't just throw them at an empty system. What we want to do is establish a properly structured set of workspaces and governance practices in order to control and direct all of this flow of data and make sure it doesn't get out of hand. So those are the three takeaways at the end of it that I really wanted to impart. And that's my final word on it. And thank you very much. And I'll hand you back now to Chris.
Thanks very much, Bill. So, going to introduce Suresh Moya now. I'll actually introduce him in the video. Suresh Moya is the Global Practice Lead for Analytics and BI, and I've had a Q&A session with him. Welcome everybody. Today I want to welcome Suresh Moya from South 32. Suresh is the Practice Lead and was the lead person that we dealt with at South 32 around the Power BI enablement piece. So welcome, Suresh. Do you want to just give us a brief background of yourself and how you fit into South 32?
Yeah, sure. Suresh Moya, Practice Lead across all South 32 operations, and I'm quite young and new to South 32. I joined last year. My background is obviously related. I was a data scientist and been in mining and analytics space in last 10 years.
Oh, great, thank you for that. So just could you provide me with a bit of background of the project and why you eventually chose Versaille as a delivery partner?
That's good. It's a good question, Chris. So basically, within South 32, we are thinking about how we can develop analytics and tools that are related to analytics over the next 24 months. Part of our program is that to enable people to actually use the tools in a most efficient way, and that's why we established the capability building programs. Power BI obviously is one of the main tools that we use for the data visualization. And we basically decided to have the training course and train people on the best practices and get them familiar with that. So we went to the market. There's a lot of off-the-shelf training courses and everything exist. And I think, Chris, you remember on the first day that we catch up and then you just say, look, you can go and get one of those off-the-shelf, but probably going to help you to some extent. But we can work together as a partner to develop the content for you and for your purpose that you have across the South 32 operational functions. So I think the proposal is basically to see how help people more specifically with their needs, and that's I think is the main thing that I've received it from Versaille and team.
Excellent, thank you. So what were you looking to achieve in the initial year and then moving forward onwards?
Yeah, so We would like to make the analytics tools available to all the people within South32 and train the people over there. What we actually we've done as a part of this capability building program is not just delivering the training programs, is actually establishing the community of practice. What I mean by community of practice is that people start helping each other within South32. And there are different aspects to that. Is that, for example, if you develop something that you think is useful for other colleagues, you can also start sharing that in the specific area that you have for the community of practice. And this is actually helping the people not to go and start from scratch of the Power BI sort of visualizations, and they basically save some time for them and improve the efficiency of the developing a dashboard. And also the other thing is that there is a question for you in a specific, for example, you want to connect some of the data sets, and you can easily ask the question on the community of practice, and people probably have done it in the past. They can come and help you out doing that. And I think that's something that is our end goal. We're gonna repeat and get more people coming to this space, and also we are actively working to have a governance around it, which means that we don't want to have the Power BI is going to be our next Excel. We're basically trying to basically have governance around that, how to develop the dashboard, and some standardization and guidelines around that, so it actually help the business to have developed a sustainable dashboard.
Excellent. Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, governance and best practices, and having the same look and feel is really, really important. So, you know, obviously the people that you had on the initial training are quite important, because you would want to elicit feedback around the training for that. So how did you go about selecting the initial trial group of candidates or students to participate in the training?
Yeah, I think it's a very good question. You basically, for the first group, you would like to have get a feedback, because obviously you develop the course and content that you think is going to be useful for the team. But you need to get people from different levels and from different operation and functions to basically come and give you constructing feedback. So you should be very open with the pilot group and say, look, this is we run it for the first time. Let's provide feedback, because we want to make it useful for like other colleagues, and set up everyone in the mindset of the this is your course, this is designed for you, and you need to provide the feedback to make it better and better. I think that's what we work on. The pilot group was fantastic in terms of they give us the feedback, and we can adjust it some of this and tweak some things. Then the next session actually works for everyone. And after that, I think is just basically you have the instructor can use those material and those feedback, and they can go and train other people.
Yeah, and that's what we're doing right now for you, right? We're busy training the second cohort and third cohort and so on of users. So, you know, things don't always go smoothly in the beginning. So what sort of challenges did we face in the beginning around, you know, setting up the Power BI enablement course and training? I'm specifically thinking South32 is a global company, and there's people situated all over the world, right? And so, you know, there were some challenges around time zones, etc. So could you maybe just elaborate just a little bit more on those?
Yeah, I think it's a couple of things. I will divide it in two parts. One is just, as you mentioned, about the time zone and getting people in one call. Sometimes is not possible. So what we actually work with Versaille team is just to see how we can actually manage that. Obviously, it might be because it was the first group and we would like to have one training course and not different time zones. So we actually run it for obviously for Australia, and just try to get some sort of like a representative from the other regions. And what we actually done with the other region, because it was like a timing, it was like 2-3 a.m. in the morning. So we actually record the session and then have the sort of like a 1 hour session with those groups to just, if there is any questions, and ask them to watch the video and then come to the other session. So it's needs additional efforts to get everyone on that. I think that's the first part of it. The other part is that because of the COVID situation and everything, it's quite hard to have the in-person training. And so you probably need to stick to Microsoft Teams or any like sort of like online platforms to run the course. You need to design the course in a way that give the people a little bit of sort of interested to sit for 2-3 hours in front of the monitor and help them to actually come with you with that journey. I think what we actually did, we did a lot of dry run with the instructor to see how we can make it more like from that perspective, people can attend and then enjoy the course. And also set up some rules right in the beginning that probably you need to shut down your emails. You're probably not in the room with the people, so just make sure that people are really focused, and then just take them to the journey of that. And sometimes it's hard, 2-3 hours people on the call, and it's hard to manage. But I think you need to bring some of those aspects and try to see what works for the audience and make it happen.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, excellent. So, in general, what has the feedback been like from the students? Did they enjoy it? Did they find it useful and valuable in terms of what they're doing every day?
Yes, exactly. This is based on the surveys that we did from before actually establishing the program, and people actually really wants to have the hands-on sort of projects to have it during and then just guided by experts. The way that we design the courses has 2 sections. One is just the online training. You go and understand about what are the Power BI features and how we actually use it. And the other one is what we call it bring your own data, which is you bring your own data, and then you have a session check out with the Versaille team on weekly basis. And then you go through and try to apply some of the things that you've learned. There's a couple of really good projects actually came out of this exercise, and people pushed it to their managers to actually use it in BAU stuff, which is kind of a very interesting and great achievement for the course.
Yeah, fantastic. Fantastic. Well, thank you for your time today, Sarisha. Any summary and final closing words?
No, I think I would like to thank you, Versaille team. It's a lot of efforts during the content development, and we went through the journey together. And obviously now it's much easier to rerun the course, but I think the efforts and then the view that Versaille has as a partner with South32 in this space, it was fantastic. And thanks.
Thank you. And it's been great working with South32 and yourself as well, Sarisha, and thank you very much for joining today. We're going to introduce Janice in a moment, and Janice actually was one of the students on the course, and she's just going to take us through some of her insights around it. So thank you very much, Sarisha.
Thanks, Chris.
So now I'll just introduce Janice Landman. Again, this is a video recording, but Janice is just going to provide us just an overview of what her experience was like during the training.
Hi everyone, thank you very much for the opportunity to join you today. My name is Janice Landman, and I attended the Versaille Power BI training last year, which is why I've been asked to come and share some of my insights and takeaways regarding the training with you today. Maybe just a bit of an overview of where I fit in before we get started. I think my background is probably a bit different to a lot of the other participants on the call today. I am a chartered accountant, so my background is really in finance services, reporting and governance, internal and external audit, and so on. I have, however, always had a strong passion and affinity, I suppose, for process improvement and the technology that goes along with that, which is what I think really brought me to my latest role within South32 in the improvement and process automation team in global business services. So that's been an exciting and challenging new endeavor. A lot of our initiatives and RPA solutions do have quite a big visualization component associated with them, which is really where Power BI comes in. And I think a lot of the time when we do develop an RPA solution or a robot or something similar, the main interface or interaction we have with our end users and customers is really that visualization piece. So it is a very important component to get right and to make sure that the necessary value is being generated from that. And when I joined the team initially, I suppose it was only myself really and one other staff member who were actively working on Power BI. And this was really based on self-learning, trial and error, and so on, which does get you to a point, but it really isn't ideal, and there is a lot of room for improvement based on that that plan of action, I suppose, or that way of implementing it. So that's really why I was very excited to learn about the Versaille training and to attend the training. And we've seen a lot of benefits coming out of that since I've attended the training, and a number of other staff members are attending the training now as well. So I'll share some of the main benefits that we've gained to date, as well as a couple of considerations after I've covered those. So for me, a really big benefit of attending the training is really equipping the team with the knowledge of what's considered best practice and laying a good foundation. So we do have a strong focus in the team on consistency and standard processes and so on. But it is difficult when you're not sure what the best practice or the leading practice is considered to be. So that was really useful to get those guidelines and to be able to apply that consistently across all the reports that the team is working on. Another big benefit was really the Power BI community of practice and working group, which was set up on Teams ahead of the training. So this really is invaluable, having a network of users who are actively working on Power BI, be able to share learnings, to troubleshoot challenges and so on. So previously there was really, as I mentioned, only one staff member I could probably call on should I get stuck with something, whereas now you have a whole community that can assist. Another big benefit has really been the broadening of the capacity or capability within the team. So there is a very, very high demand for Power BI reports in not only global business services, but South32 as well. And the problem is often capacity and having the necessary hands on deck to actually attend to those requests. So having this training rolled out to a number of additional team members have meant that we can up that capacity and really get a lot more output done and attend to a lot more of those requests. The other aspect that I really enjoyed regarding the training was the bring your own data portion of it. So we were asked as participants to bring sample data and scenarios we were struggling with, and were afforded the opportunity to have one-on-one interactions with the presenters to troubleshoot those to arrive at the most appropriate solutions, which really led to a lot of good outputs from the training itself. And I suppose the final benefit I'm going to touch on today is the reference materials and videos that are made available for future use following the training. So oftentimes I'll have an issue I'm working with in Power BI, and I'll remember it was something covered in the training. And being able to actually go back to the training materials and the detailed videos is really helpful in a lot of those scenarios. Thanks. So those are the main benefits that I wanted to touch on today. I suppose some considerations for ensuring success of the training and really getting the most out of it, I think is just really related to staff selection. So some things to consider when you selecting staff to go on the training. You know, pick people who are working with Power BI or will be working with Power BI actively. I mean, a lot of the skills really aren't going to sink in or be very valuable going forward if you don't practice them consistently. So that's important, as well as, I suppose, picking team members who are dedicated and will actively participate. There's a steep learning curve. There's a lot of information covered. So it's important that team members actually put in the effort to get the required value out of the training. And then I suppose the last one is something which is beneficial, but it's not essential at the same time, but it does help, is if you have team members who do have a bit more advanced Excel skill, they've worked maybe on Power Query or had exposure to Power BI. It's certainly helpful, although again, it's not a prerequisite, as the team does start with the basics before they get into the more advanced modules. So that is what I have to share today regarding the training. Very enjoyable, certainly recommend it. Thank you again for having me, and hope everyone has a great day further.
And thank you, Janice. So that brings us to the end of the webinar. We're just a minute over time. If you'd like to contact us, our information is presented there. Thank you very much for attending today.